Hey garden friends, have you noticed the cooler mornings and the shorter days recently? It is finally starting to feel a little more like fall. And although I love the summer vegetables that come out of the garden, it has been such a long hot summer and I am so ready for a cooler gardening season. I'm ready to plant the root vegetables and the leafy greens and the brassicas. But before I do that, I have to prep my garden, and I wanted to share with you all of the things that I'm doing just as a reminder for what you need to do if you want to start a fall garden this year. Before I start my fall planting, I like to clear out all of my garden beds. So any spent plants or diseased plants that are still present, I will remove. And I also remove all of the plant debris, the leaves and everything else, because a lot of pests, like those horrible leaf-footed bugs, as well as certain diseases, can be harbored and overwintered in all of that plant debris. So instead of letting it decompose in my beds, I clear it away. Like this zucchini plant here, which is a wonder of nature. I planted this in late spring and it made it through late spring, all summer, and now into fall, and it never got the vine borer or the squash bugs. So I'm actually very pleased with this. This is the Mexican gray squash, and I don't know if it's just that I had it really well hidden amongst all the other flowers and things, because I do like to mix my planting beds up, but it is time for it to go. It's really starting to fizzle out. It's gotten to become quite a big plant, so sorry, Mr. Zucchini. I really appreciate you. You have been productive all summer long, but now it's time to go to the compost pile. These are some of the decisions I'm talking about when it comes to spent plants. It still looks relatively healthy and it's got a few tiny little zucchinis on it, but it is just time for it to go. Some of the fruits are kind of funky and just not forming very well. So to the compost pile. Speaking of the compost pile, my pile doesn't always get as hot as I would like it to, but that's all right because the plants will still break down and decompose and make a beautiful compost just a little bit slower. Because of that, my compost pile may not get hot enough to kill those diseases and pests. And so I will just play it safe and put them in the garbage and only put plants into my compost pile that are disease and pest free. Generally, I will just turn my compost once or twice a season. So as I am cleaning up my garden for the season, it's a great reminder for me to turn my compost pile before the temperatures get cold. This will introduce oxygen to all of those microbes and fungal networks that are in my compost pile, and it will kind of rev them up, increase the temperature a bit, and get things going before the temperatures get too low. I like to layer my browns, like small woody branches and twigs and woody material in general, in 2 to 3 inch pieces that I've cut up, along with some of my kitchen scraps and my plant matter from my garden beds, which are considered greens. Once those layers are in place in a ratio of 1 parts brown to 3 parts green, I will water those in really well consistently each time I get those layers completed. And that's because it's so dry in the desert, there's just not enough moisture to keep those microbes going and decomposing all of that plant matter. It's simply watering in with either a hose, a sprinkler, or a watering can, and that should be enough. In the spring and the fall, when we're changing out garden beds, I find that I have a ton of garden waste that I need to compost, but I don't want to add it all to my compost bins at the same time because that will mess up the ratio of greens and browns and it just won't decompose properly. So instead, I will create a pile like this one behind me, and that way I can add it throughout the seasons as I need it without having to overwhelm my compost bins. If you've got a lot of plant matter after cleaning out your beds from season to season and you have the room, it's better to make a pile next to your compost bin so that you can chop and layer all of that material in as you go rather than stuffing it all in at one time. I think it's great to have extra material that I can use during seasons like the winter time when I don't really have a lot of plant material to put into my compost bins, and then I can just pull from these piles and add it to my compost bins as I need it. The next thing is to weed thoroughly. I can almost hear the garden and all the weeds breathing a sigh of relief after this long hot summer. I am too. But I need to clear all of those away because during the cool weather, those weeds are going to flourish, just like all of our garden plants. And I don't want them competing with my plants for water and nutrients. I like to clear all of them out by the roots so that I'm starting with a clean slate with only the plants that I want growing in the garden. Bermuda grass, I am coming for you. Speaking of Bermuda grass, I don't put my Bermuda grass into my compost because I don't think that it gets hot enough to kill it thoroughly, and I'll end up with small little fragments which can start new Bermuda grass plants. So instead, I throw mine straight into the garbage. One of the nice things about planting a garden in southern Arizona is that we get 2 chances for planting hot weather things like tomatoes and peppers and things like that. And so a lot of these things that I planted along with or right after the monsoon season are just starting to get going and just starting to produce, like these peppers right here and these tomato plants behind them. So I will leave these beds intact. These will not be cleared out probably until late November. The next thing that I'll do is either test or amend my soil. Now, to be honest, I don't test my soil every year. I tested my soil 2 years ago with a local lab, which I'll link below, but I haven't seen any signs of nutritional deficiency. My plants are growing well, and I amend my soil all the time, every time I switch out seasons. I was lucky and I actually had really good soil. If you're working with soil that's very poor or you're noticing some nutritional deficiencies in your plants, I would recommend testing your soil. As I switch out my plants from season to season, I always add a couple of inches of organic compost. I'll also feed very hungry plants with either seaweed, fish emulsion, or a balanced organic fertilizer each time that I plant a new round of plants. But that goes for the really hungry plants, like corn and tomatoes and things that really pull a lot of nutrients from the soil. It's vital to add nutrients to your soil, especially after the long hot summer when you've been probably watering pretty heavily. All that water is going to flush out a lot of the nutrients. So to combat that, I will add a couple of inches of organic compost to the top of each bed in the fall and in the spring so that I know my plants are off to a good start. I'll keep those beds watered even in between planting when I don't have any seedlings or seeds planted in them yet, and that's because the soil life needs moisture just like you and I do, and I don't want them to dry out. I want to keep that soil biology supported and healthy so that it's ready to take care of my plants when I put them in the ground. Just like with any other garden season, you can start your fall plants either from seed, from transplant, or directly sowing out in the garden. I do a little bit of all of that. There are some plants that are slow to mature, so you need to give them a head start by starting your seeds inside a few weeks before you're ready to transplant them out. Now, if you haven't done that yet, and since we're into October, don't worry about that. There are a couple of tricks that you can use and that I use to be able to stay on track with your planting schedule. One is succession planting. So what I like to do is plant a few seeds every couple of weeks for certain varieties. For instance, broccoli. I don't want to plant all of my broccoli seeds all at once because I'm going to end up having to harvest and figure out what to do with 48 broccoli heads all at one time. So instead, I will plant 4 or 5 seeds every couple of weeks, and that way I can stagger the harvest, and it's also a lot less work for me. I can keep up with seed starting, I can keep up with transplanting out, and then later on I can keep up with harvesting and processing. If you haven't started seeds yet for slow maturing things like cabbage and broccoli, there is a shortcut. You can go to your local garden center, you can purchase seedlings, and then you can also at the same time start some seeds in seedling trays. That will give you a couple of weeks in between. While your purchased seedlings are in the ground and going, your seeds will be starting and germinating and ready to go in a couple of weeks, and then you can hit the ground running and start the process then. As you're choosing the varieties you want to grow this fall, it's also a great idea to check your USDA growing zone. You can do that by entering your zip code into a USDA growing zone website. There are a few of them, and then you can determine what your first and last frost dates are, and then that will help you make good decisions about what to plant. Choose varieties that are either not frost sensitive or that will mature before the first frost comes. I live just a little bit south of Tucson. I'm in zone 8B, but if you're in a different part of southern Arizona, you may be in a different USDA growing zone. All of my beautiful zinnias from the summer are starting to fizzle out. Some of them aren't ready yet to collect, but pretty soon I'll be able to collect these too for seed. One of my favorite things to do in the fall is save seeds for the next season. I save a lot more than I need because I like sharing them with local seed libraries and seed banks so that other people can grow seeds as well. I also really love it that I don't have to spend extra money next year buying more seeds. Some varieties are a little more work than others to save because you have to process them right away, like tomatoes or cucumbers. But there are other seeds that you can pick and put aside and then process them later on in the winter when you're dreaming about the summer garden, but you also have a lot less to do. Those varieties like okra and sunflowers and sorghum and beans all can sit until you have time to process them. So those are some of my favorite seeds to save. If you use drip irrigation, you want to check your irrigation system in the fall before the cool season starts. I like to go along and check for any kind of clogs because southern Arizona has pretty hard water and the minerals can build up and clog those tiny holes. I also like to check for any leaks because I don't want to be wasting water or drowning my cabbages. The other thing you need to do when it comes to irrigation is if you're using a timer, you want to adjust the frequency at which you water your plants, whether it be your trees, your shrubs, or your garden vegetables. You don't want to adjust the duration at which you're watering your vegetables or your trees or your shrubs. Plants will still benefit from a slow, deep watering to develop robust root systems, but you want to adjust the number of times per week or per month that you water them because they simply don't need as much water in the cool season because they're losing less to evaporation. So for example, if you have a tree that you water for an hour twice a week, you don't need to do it that often. You can do it for an hour every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks or whatever it happens to be. That's going to be based on the type and the size of the tree you have. The same goes for your vegetable garden. Just adjust the frequency, not the duration. I also like to apply a deep layer of mulch to my vegetable garden. I used to use alfalfa or straw, but because of the risk of persistent pesticides in those products, I've been experimenting with a deep composting method. So I will amend my soil with the 2 to 3 inches of compost as usual, but then I will also add around my plants a couple of extra inches of compost so that I have a really thick, nice layer, and that seems to do really well in place of other kinds of mulch. Just like in other times of the year, I like to do my morning garden walk just to inspect my plants for the presence of pests. Now before the first frost, I'm going to find aphids and caterpillars, and I'll also be looking for those pests in the late winter after the temperatures start to warm up a bit and they start coming back. If I find those pests, the first thing I try to do is just remove them manually. So in the case of aphids, if I spray them with a strong stream of water, that's not only going to knock them off the plant, but it will also break their mouth parts so that they can't feed on any more of my plants. When it comes to caterpillars, I will pick them off by hand and I'll just deposit them into my platform feeder, and the Vermilion flycatchers and other birds will take it from there. I like to use these white row covers. You can find them online or at any garden center. They will exclude pests and they'll also protect your plants from frost. They come in different fabric weights, and so what you're using in late fall might be different from what you're using in the middle of winter when it comes to protecting your plants from frost. I just have them ready, and if I know that there's going to be a frost or if I have a heavy population of pests present, I'll put them up. Otherwise, I leave my plants be because I like to have them open to the air. These are really nice because light and water will penetrate them, and so you don't have to worry about your plants drying out or not getting enough sunlight. If you have perennial trees and shrubs, I don't recommend pruning them in the late fall. That's because pruning them is going to stimulate the growth of new leaves and branches, and those tender new leaves and branches are going to be more vulnerable to frost damage. Instead, hold off on that till spring. I would say the exception is if you see any damaged or broken branches, go ahead and remove those, but otherwise, I just let them be. I do apply a 3-layer treatment to my perennial trees and shrubs to provide nutrients, to conserve soil moisture, and to maintain and regulate the temperature during the very hot or the very cold months. And that 3-layer treatment is first adding a layer of worm castings, and that provides a lot of microbial life and nutrients. Then I will add compost, again, that provides nutrients, and then lastly I will top that with a layer of wood chips. This treatment is is going to be several inches thick, and I don't disturb the last layer that I added the season before, and that's because the fungal networks don't need to be disturbed. I don't want to disturb those because those are going to help provide nutrients to the tree or the shrub, and so those need to remain intact without me chopping into them. So I just add that new 3-layer treatment right to the top. If you've been thinking about planting any new trees or shrubs in your garden, I would recommend doing it now, and that's because the cool temperatures in the evenings and the hot temperatures in the afternoon will help speed the establishment of these new plants. The other thing I would recommend is going a little bit smaller. So a 5 to 15 gallon size will actually establish more quickly than a larger size. When I plant, I'm going with a size like this. This is a fig tree that I took as a cutting last year, and it's about ready to go in the ground, so I'm going to be putting this in soon. These are all of the jobs that I am up to this weekend. I would love to know what jobs you like to do to prep for your fall garden, or if you're going to have a fall garden this year. I've heard a lot of people talking about how they're having a fall garden for the first time this year, and I think that's just really exciting because in some ways it's the easiest time of year to start a garden. I'm Kara from So Arizona. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, happy gardening.